We hear about type 1 and type 2 diabetes all the time. I talk about them a lot here. I also talk about type 1.5 or LADA, latent autoimmune diabetes of adults, which is what I have. But today we're getting into a lesser known form of diabetes known as type 3C. Welcome to the show. I'm Justin. I have type 1.5 diabetes. Typically I just say type 1 because it's handled the same. On here, I talk all things diabetes tech, news, and research with industry leaders, healthcare providers, and people with diabetes who use the tech themselves. Today's guest, Yvonne Werning, had pains for 3 to 4 years, which ultimately led to a pancreatitis and a disintegration of his pancreas and its functions. He now has type 3C diabetes, and it's treated similarly to type 1. And just last month, he had his gallbladder removed to prevent future issues. Today, Yvonne is on the show to share his story, tell us how we can detect and potentially prevent this, his journey over the last year since diagnosis, and to tell us about the insulin patch he uses called CeQur. CeQur is similar to a patch pump in that it's placed on your body. This one lasts 4 days, and it's not automated. There are no electronics in this. The user manually injects 2 units with each click. As always, keep in mind that my show is not medical advice and is for educational purposes only. Always consult with a physician before making changes to your healthcare. All right, let's get into it. Yvonne, welcome to the show. It's good to have you here.
Great to be here, Justin. Thank you.
Yeah, so you reached out to me. First of all, how did you find my content?
Well, we're gonna get into it, I guess, but when I was recently diagnosed with diabetes, I use YouTube a lot to learn things, and I ended up on your channel, and that's how I found you. Yeah.
What were you looking for?
My first searches were what's diabetes? I had no idea.
Wow.
And then eventually I turned to, the kind of treatments and the different, and he heard about pumps and yeah, so I started researching all that, the new tech.
Why did you feel inclined to message me? You sent me an email. You were like, Justin, I have type 3C and you don't seemingly have content on this. I don't. Why did you go ahead and search out my contact and shoot me an email?
I don't know. I think it was just a feeling that it wasn't for me, that maybe a lot of people with 3C would enjoy seeing some content that mentions them, at least. At the end of the day, and we might get into this more, it's not like it's so different, in my case at least, from type 1. So I don't really need that much different advice or content, but I was surprised you can't really find people talking about the diabetes I have, which is 3C, or how I got there. And yeah, I didn't really necessarily want to be on the show. I wasn't trying to get myself on the show, but I thought, in fact, I think I mentioned maybe if you had endocrinologists or somebody to talk about it that would know more than me. But yeah, I thought that, I don't know what the numbers are, but I think there must be a lot of people who got to diabetes through this path, and I thought it would be interesting if you include it, because I appreciate a lot the people I hear that talk about their struggle with different forms of diabetes, and I thought that it would be interesting to just at least have some content on that.
Yeah.
Even if it's just to say it's the same as type 1.
Yes, but there is something to the lived experience that is different for every type of diabetes, whether that be juvenile, being diagnosed at such a young age, having to go through those teenage years with diabetes. People can bond over that. I was diagnosed at 30 years old, so I really bond with other people who were also diagnosed later in life and really understand that before and after this, you lived this whole life, pre this diabetes diagnosis, and then having that happen, like that's something to bond over. And the same for you. We're going to get into your whole story, but I hope that people listening to this who have been through similar experiences are just feel seen, because it's possible that your community within the diabetes community may not be as seen. I mean, considering I create all this content and I never mention it. I've never mentioned it. So I'm just happy to have you here to talk all about it and educate me and my listeners. Explain to all of us, what is type 3C?
Okay. And I'm not an expert. I don't want to sound like one. It's basically the diabetes you get from damage to the pancreas, typically from pancreatitis. I think it might include other damages, perhaps physical damage from, say, a bullet or something, or maybe some forms of cancer. I don't know, but I think the main one is from pancreatitis. And so you were saying you were diagnosed late. I think this is one of the paths where the people who end up with diabetes late and a diabetes that looks more like type 1 reach this, because pancreatitis affects you a little later in life.
What is pancreatitis?
Yeah, pancreatitis is also, I didn't even know what the pancreas did, to be honest.
Same.
Okay. I had studied it long ago. I mean, everyone here now obviously knows a lot about the pancreas who's watching this channel. But yeah, pancreatitis is an inflammation of the pancreas. And there are many different kinds of pancreatitis and different ways to get there. And basically the pancreas becomes inflamed and gets damaged. And so unlike type 1 diabetes, which I understand is an immune attack on certain cells of your pancreas, in this case, it's really more a physical damage to the whole pancreas. So you might have the endocrine function, which is, the beta alpha cells, the insulin and glucagon, those get damaged, but also even the exocrine functions of the pancreas, which are the digestive enzymes that help you digest your food, get damaged.
Yeah. Well, I want to dive into your story. You were diagnosed a year ago. This all happened a year ago at the age of 49 years old. You said that you were generally healthy. So what had you been experiencing that kind of led to this moment?
Yeah, good question. So to explain how I got pancreatitis, there's really almost two common pathways. And the kind I had is acute and severe pancreatitis, is generally developed from an obstruction of the common duct that is shared by the pancreas and liver. And that obstruction happens through a gallstone. And so that's the main, theory behind what happened to me. I had a gallstone in my gallbladder produced by the liver, traveled down and obstructed the pancreas. And then that triggers a reaction, because the enzymes in the pancreas, I understand, might become activated, but they have nowhere to go. They don't go to the digestive system, so they literally start digesting the pancreas itself, and that creates obviously damage already, but also an immune response and inflammation process that also just creates a chain of events for the pancreas itself and also for the rest of your body. So it's very dangerous. In my case, I had a very acute and severe kind. So I ended up in the ICU, and I was intubated for almost a month. And there was a risk there of mortality that was quite high. But I made it. But part of my pancreas didn't make it. So basically, I might have 20, nobody knows, but some 20% functional of the pancreas or something like that. That varies a lot from patient to patient. But yeah, in my case, it's an obstruction of the pancreas, and that leads to this very acute, meaning a very sudden and very strong symptoms, pain and vomiting and a lot of other things. The other half of the people, this is roughly half the pancreatitis cases. The other half of pancreatitis cases are more chronic. That means, they keep happening and slowly, and they're maybe in an older population. And sometimes that's due to maybe genetic factors, but other times due to alcohol abuse and things like that.
Now, last time we spoke, you mentioned that maybe for 3 to 4 years, you were experiencing these occasional pains. Was that this or leading to this? And could there have been a way to like catch this early, or it's like, if this is happening, it's happening, you would have just kind of been able to make it maybe less painful? I don't know.
No, I think I could have avoided it. I think I had signs of having gallstones because I had a pain I would say for the last 20 years, every 3 years, I would have a bout of a few weeks where I would have pain at night, a stomach pain, stomach quote unquote. Generally it was kind of high, so I didn't think it felt like a digestive issue, but I didn't know exactly where. And the thing that happened in my case is I called the doctor, and without them seeing me, they gave me a few ideas of what it could be. They thought it was acid reflux, but maybe I didn't tell them just how bad the pain was. But it's difficult, obviously, to diagnose like that. But I think now looking back, I was prone to having gallstones. So a fraction of the population is prone. I've just looked this up. I don't know what the numbers are, but let's say 10 to 15% is a number I saw. Healthy people that just have gallstones because it's just a tiny imbalance in the liver one way or the other can produce gallstones. And then a fraction of those gallstones pass and they hurt, and a fraction pass without symptoms. And then a fraction of those pass and they don't only hurt, but they create this pancreatitis. So I think for many years I was passing them. Sometimes they did hurt and I wasn't getting pancreatitis. And if I had known that, but I always thought when that happened, I had acid reflux.
What was the pain like? What did the pain feel like, and where did you feel it?
It was, kind of where the abdomen meets the rib cage, very much in the center here.
Okay.
And but it was hard to pinpoint. Like for instance, when they said acid reflux, I said, "How could that be? I think acid reflux hurts up here." It hurts
Yeah.
because I've had a little bit of acid reflux, and I felt that's where it hurt. And they said, "No, there's different kinds, and sometimes the esophagus is difficult to pinpoint the pain." So I think it's difficult. I mean, I wish I had gone in and followed up on that. Instead, I took kind of the quick advice, and then when I used to have this pain over the years, I didn't follow up. I should have followed up. And then what you can do is you can do different scans in the body that will see the gallstones. So you literally see them on different imaging techniques. And it's not that difficult. And then if they see the gallstones and you have the symptoms, they might recommend different procedures for destroying the gallstones or even removing the gallbladder. And that would have prevented my pancreatitis and my current diabetes.
There is a health thing that I deal with currently, like a fatigue and lots of other things. And that for me, there was this moment that felt like a catalyst that made it worse. And there have been moments, especially early on when I started dealing with this, where I was really hard on myself and felt like I caused this, even though maybe that's not, the case, and that it kind of was already happening. But it did feel like I did something to make it worse. How do you handle that? It sounds like you said that theoretically this could have been avoided. Like, have you ever been hard on yourself with that?
Let me answer your question in a second, but first, I can't believe you would think that you brought it on yourself. In that, I can't see how you would fall into that thinking. It's so out of your control what happened to you.
Yeah, I mean, I guess like when you're in such a debilitating or experiencing something so debilitating, and you can remember an exact moment and action that may have exacerbated it.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't want to fall into like that whole experience, but yeah, like for a while I was hard on myself.
Yeah, no, I mean, in my case, I feel like I did have a chance to figure this out and prevent the whole thing. And again, preventing the pancreatitis would have had a lot of benefits besides from preventing my diabetes now. But I don't dwell on it, to be honest. I wish it had been different, but I don't dwell on that too much. No, in my case. I mean, you do it to yourself. You'd feel, this is the sort of thing that happens to someone else you love. It's much harder, I think. I have kids. If it happened to a kid of mine and I missed something, I probably wouldn't stop thinking about it. But in my case, I just look forward.
Here now forward, right?
Exactly.
Stop dwelling on the
Exactly.
past because it's the past. So tell me about that experience, like at the hospital. Like you find, what led you to be like, oh, I gotta go to the hospital?
Yeah, no, it was just not one of those cases where it's marginal. I had these pains over the years, but those were very painful, lasted a few hours. And I would walk around the house because I could, just to distract myself and get over it. And sometimes my wife would say, go to the hospital. I wish I had heard her, listened to her. What I mean by that is I have a high bar for wanting to seek help. I'm like, no, let me wait. Let me see if it goes away. But when this hit me, it was just, just a huge pain. Yeah, and you have to vomit everything, and you can't stop. And I was, very far from there being a decision. It was very clear I had to go to the emergency room right away, and just even for the pain. So there I went, and they also quickly triaged me. They could see the amount of pain, and the diagnosis was also pretty quick. I think they have to rule some other things out quickly, but yeah. So no, there wasn't a lot of doubt. It's one of those things, if you look it up, I think it's one of those very painful things. I think, the kidney stone is completely different, but it's also very painful, I hear. The gallstone is also something that I think its obstruction can create a lot of pain. And so I think it's very hard to run into this and have any doubts on seeking attention at that point.
What was going through your mind at that moment?
I don't think much. Just, the pain that you feel is just excruciating. And yeah, I don't think I thought much or was trying to figure out what was happening. I started thinking a lot more later when I had to make decisions or they were telling me what I had. But at the moment of the onset, hardly could think.
Yeah. You said that you were intubated for a month.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So basically, after going to the hospital and after they rule out other things, chest pain, they always have to rule out other things, heart and so on. With their blood tests and other in imaging, they conclude it's the pancreatitis. Often these cases, there's really a huge wide range of severity. So I had the acute. That means it's a fast onset. And then the question is how severe it's going to be. And then some patients, after the obstruction self-resolves, in my case it's self-resolved. I don't know what they do in other cases. They may have to go in there and do something. But in my case, they didn't see the obstruction anymore. They saw what happened after. So first they sent me to, a regular surgery or pre-surgery room in case I needed something urgent, but I was kind of just on standby. And what they mainly do is my understanding is the way pancreatitis is treated is mainly supportive. They support you, they give you fluids, they give you painkillers, but there's not a lot they can go in and fix it. Maybe in some cases, yes, but in my case, definitely it was a supportive type approach. But then after a day or two, someone came by and told me that I probably had the very severe kind. And this means that you're not going to recover very quickly on your own, and you're likely to get a necrotizing pancreatitis. So you're likely to get some parts of your pancreas dying. And then secondly, it also means there's a risk to other organ failing because the pancreatitis is affecting the whole body. It just affects a lot of organs. So in my case, kidneys and liver and intestines. But then the main one to be worried about, life-threatening, is lungs. And so I had SIRS and ARDS eventually. That is very tricky. At that point, they noticed that, and so I was taking the ICU. And then they watched me for a day, and they were giving me breathing support without intubating me yet. So you take oxygen, but eventually it got so severe that they recommended I was intubated.
This episode is sponsored by Omnipod. As someone with T1D and with an incredibly active lifestyle, it's important for me not to get tied up, especially with tubes on my insulin pump. I love to go swimming, lift weights, and play kickball with friends. And with Omnipod 5, I never have to worry about tubes getting in the way. Plus, not having to disconnect helps me to stay in range during all of my favorite physical activities. That includes sexy time too. See if you're eligible for a 10-day trial by visiting omnipod.com/diabetic. On there, you'll see full safety and risk information and trial terms. That's omnipod.com/diabetic. After this entire experience at the hospital, did they tell you, like, you have diabetes now, or you likely have diabetes? Like, what was the status of your pancreas? Was that measurable to them?
Yeah, I think the hospital, while I think even was intubated, of course they were measuring all sorts of markers in my blood, and I had arterial line, I had everything, and I was getting eventually support in many ways, nutrients and so on, but they were I think they already detected and probably knew this could happen, is that I needed insulin. So they were giving me insulin, I think, already when I was intubated, for sure when I came out, because, I don't know everything that happened while I was intubated. I was intubated and in coma for that month.
Wow.
I've looked at records, but I started a treatment of insulin while I was in the hospital. So I would get, and when I woke up and I was back, they had taken me off the breathing tube. I was getting blood, to measure my glucose levels, and I was getting insulin according to a sliding scale and so on. But what we didn't know is if that would be temporary or permanent, because this varies a lot, the course of this disease, how much you don't have insulin temporarily because your pancreas is angry, versus you've created permanent damage. When I left, there was some discussion of, we don't know how much you'll need or whether you'll need insulin even. If you will be diabetic or not, it was a bit uncertain because they can't know.
Right, because everyone who goes through this, their pancreas is affected to a different degree. Who knows which functions may be altered, right?
Exactly. And I was really hoping I wouldn't need it, of course, that this would all be a temporary thing and I would bounce back. When you damage your pancreas through pancreatitis, you really don't have a pancreas, in the sense that you also lose the enzymes. So you also need support when you eat. Sometimes you have to take enzymes. So I also left the hospital with some enzymes to eat, to aid in my eating, as I had to slowly get back to eating. At first I couldn't eat, but that whole transition, I was going to need maybe support for insulin, maybe support for enzymes. It wasn't known how much of each I would need, and at some point I had this optimistic, outcome that I might not need it.
Yeah.
Then, one thing I learned about diabetes, I don't know if it's everyone's experience, is that it's not like someone can run a test and then they know how much you need. And so at some point they even mentioned I might not need it, so I could try not taking insulin for a while and see what happened. And I tried that, and I think I experienced, maybe what people with diabetes one experience when they don't know they have it, and what before people diagnose it correctly, maybe especially. I felt this fatigue after like almost a week of not taking it. I think I lost like 8 pounds. And I couldn't, if I never felt so tired in my life. I tried to get up, and it was like, well, now I understand. My cells couldn't get any energy, basically. Even though I was eating, I was just not getting that into my cells. So that was an eye opener. but so slowly I recognized I needed the insulin, and I've been iterating on that process, and yeah.
Did they give you or advise you to start testing your blood sugar with a meter or a continuous glucose monitor?
It's interesting. I mean, because when you're in the hospital, they have the highest standards for everything.
Yeah.
So there, it's all blood, of course. And then when you're discharged from the hospital, they give you what they can give you, which looks a lot like what you do in the hospital. So it probably looks more like what people did in the 70s. I'm exaggerating. Obviously, there's the benefit of of some of the technology, but I basically had the insulin vials, I had the needles, and I had the strips. That's what I left the hospital with.
Did they mention continuous glucose monitors?
No, so the way it works is the hospital discharges you, but they ask you to follow up and take on an endocrinologist. So you have like an inpatient endocrinologist that helped you out with a lot of things, but they don't do the kind of they're not there. Obviously, they're there for the acute situation within the hospital. And then I started getting into the technologies and all the options when I finally got sort of as an outpatient my endocrinologist. But that took a while. But yeah, so basically when
how long did that take? I'm just curious.
No, not very long. I mean, I was like on Zoom very quickly.
Okay.
But until I finally find the endocrinologist, it's my endocrinologist now, it took maybe a few months. Yeah. So I was well taken care of, but until you get on that kind of path that I think you're talking about, which is where you can make choices and they have to do with the trade-off of convenience also, not just getting the insulin. That's more the outpatient endocrinologist, and it's clearly not what the hospital does.
Yeah, I feel like what I would love to see is you're at that hospital and then they send you out with a 3-month supply of continuous glucose monitors and say, hey, let's monitor your levels constantly. If you're starting to see your levels are always in 200, 300, 400, then, we're going to need insulin. This is, the insulin, whatever, rather than just, what happens often is patients don't get this immediately and they don't always know exactly what to look out for. It does sound like you did see someone pretty quickly. Like in retrospect, do you think that would that have been helpful for you?
I think so. But I think I had a lot of good quality care. I think it's kind of the normal transition.
Yeah.
In my case, I was really in an ICU, and they just have a huge standard of what they have to measure the actual blood. An ICU is just not gonna use a glucose monitor.
Yeah.
But yeah, it would have been helpful, I think. But in my case at least, I had so much going on. At the beginning, the insulin and all that was only a part of it. So I'm okay with my transition there. I think at that point, it was me Googling and finding your channel and learning about all these options that by the time I went to the endocrinologist, I had a lot of understanding of what was out there, and that was very helpful. And also, I think on a human side, like you said earlier, just hearing other people's stories also and getting an understanding of how people go through this.
Yeah, totally. What is your treatment like now? Like, what have you come to the conclusion of? You're taking insulin. Like, what is there anything? Are you taking those enzymes? Do you need those? Is there anything else that you're noticing like that needs to be, supporting the pancreas?
No, right now I think I'm sort of maybe somewhat enzyme deficient, but not enough that I feel I need to take them. My treatment now is mainly just the insulin. I have I kind of am aware of the potential for needing enzymes, but for now that's on standby. I'm not using them. So mainly it's very similar to a type 1, I think. I don't want to necessarily say it's equivalent because I don't know, and I don't know how much the type 1s vary, but there's some baseline of my pancreas that probably produces some insulin. So maybe slightly beneficial. I might need less insulin than some type ones, I think. But yeah, when I'm not taking it, or I've taken it badly, or I eat a pizza and it's just crazy. It goes crazy without the proper. And it took me a while to learn how to do that and how to count carbs, and I'm still learning. I'm still not not perfect at it, but so essentially, I would characterize myself as very similar to type 1 at this point.
And you just had another surgery done, right? You got your gallbladder removed.
Yes.
Why did that happen?
Well, I think that would have been good to do before I got all this. But I think there is a risk of recurrence, and so the doctors recommend you get the gallbladder out. So I just waited almost a year until I was really recovered. The recovery is very slow when you're so long in the hospital. It was almost 2 months in the hospital, a month and a half. But they immediately sort of recommend getting the gallbladder out, because the gallbladder is a little like the appendix. It's slightly more functional, but it's an organ that might have used to have a bigger role, but now has a very small role. Yeah. So the role, as it's been described to me, is to accumulate some of the bilious and release it when you need it for certain fatty foods. So it doesn't produce anything. It's more like a sack that times things.
So you're not needing to like substitute it with anything or change. Do you need to change like any of your routines because that's gone?
No. Well, for now it's been a week, so
yeah, right.
So I don't know, but I think in a very small fraction of people, they just get the kind of thing I might have gotten also just with the pancreas, which is you have a harder time digesting foods.
Have you met anyone else who's gone through a similar experience?
Yes. Curiously, some people that are very close to me had this, and I didn't know when they had it. But they had a pancreatitis. It was bad enough. They went to the hospital. They got treatment. One of them got their gallbladder out. The other didn't. So I had heard of the hospital. I didn't understand really what was going on. Then they told me about the gallbladder, but okay, I didn't know. But they didn't have long-term, damage to their pancreas as much as I did. If they had some damage, maybe one of them, but they did not become diabetic or insulin. They don't get treatment with insulin.
Okay.
Yeah, so they had an acute but less severe pancreatitis. So I think it's one of those things where people have it, but you don't hear about it so much all the time. But I don't know what the exact prevalence of it is. But
have you engaged with like the diabetes community at all?
Well, through your channel mainly. But
I love that.
Yeah, it's really been helpful hearing other people's stories on your channel and some other videos I've seen. But I haven't reached out to any of the communities that I know exist that are fantastic. I'm curious about them. I think maybe I will in the future.
And I think we'll get some stories in the comments on this episode as well, which I'm looking forward to you just seeing and other people hearing you and kind of the engagement that can happen between all of you.
Definitely. I'd love to connect with anyone or see a comment, or if anyone wants to email me. Yeah, I feel, this community aspect is super important. It was helpful for me to see, and in particular, you told your story in one of the videos that you got it later in life. And to me, I can imagine how difficult it is for a child, obviously. But then it's kind of a different story in the sense that I'm imagining the parents are the ones doing all the research.
Right. What was that experience for you? 49 years old, you've lived a fair amount of life without diabetes. Now you're, having to think about everything pretty differently. I'm sure you're still learning a lot because it takes at least a year to pretty much get diabetes down. But I mean, the struggle continues. It never gets easy. What has that kind of been like for you?
It's a little bit different than someone like you, that I imagine your main diagnosis was you have diabetes. I
Yeah.
had such a life-threatening thing that, to be honest, it sort of helps put the diabetes in perspective.
Yeah.
It's really bad in the sense that it's permanent. That was, everything else I made it through, and if it weren't for the diabetes, I'd almost have no consequence of that disease, given that I made it out alive. That was the main risk. So diabetes is not a small thing. It's a huge thing. But to me, because I also went through a near-death experience, it kind of put it in perspective for me. So I think I was really bummed that I had it, and I was hoping it wouldn't be that big as it ended up being. But I think I was a little bit philosophically quicker to accept it and quicker to not, really, than maybe some people are quicker to just seek the
Yeah.
solutions out and not deny it. I don't know what people go through. I don't know, in your case, Justin, what?
Yeah, I had a similar experience earlier in my life. When I was 21, I had cancer. And so I thought I was going to die at that age. And that really matured me and gave me a different perspective of life. And then when I was diagnosed at 30 with diabetes, I was kind of like, oh, it could be worse. Like I could die, right? And I know
Right.
people with type 1 that are living fine lives and great lives, but it will just be more challenging. But I am kind of thankful that I did have an experience that put that into perspective. So I wasn't like moping around or feeling sorry for myself. I kind of just was like, all right, well, what are we going to do about it?
Yeah, and to be honest, we're lucky because the era, to get diabetes
Right.
now must be so different. That's what I learned on this channel, and it's even still improving and improving. So I immediately heard you could get pumps. Whoa, okay. Almost like a fake pancreas. That also made me optimistic. But I realized we're lucky, because someone who got diabetes 50 years ago was a very different story, I imagine.
Absolutely. And I try to do that with all of my content, is put things into perspective, look at the history and how far we have come, because it's so easy for many people to complain about the current technology. I'm like, if you looked, even just 5 years ago, like it was nowhere close to where it is today. So, I'm
Yeah.
so thankful for where we are today and excited that I get to report on everything that's coming, because it's a lot of great stuff. Today's episode is sponsored by T1D Exchange. You can directly make an impact on diabetes healthcare, treatments, and technology by participating in the T1D Exchange registry. It starts with a simple survey about your life with T1D, and it only takes about 15 minutes. After that, you'll have a personal portal with ongoing T1D study and survey opportunities. Plus, some of these studies even offer compensation. Signing up with the link in the show notes helps support my channel, and it allows me to continue putting out free content. You can sign up at t1dexchange.org/diabetic or click that link in today's show notes. So you're looking into the technology. Have you made any decisions on what you're going to start? Are you using anything now? And have you made any decisions on like what you want to use?
First I was doing, after the syringe, I quickly moved to the pens and did daily injections. And I was considering going on a automated pump. And it's kind of where I think I may go. I'm looking at all the different options, and getting informed. It's kind of where I might want to land. But I'm not currently on any automated pump right now. And I have some reasons for that, but I think they will likely dissipate. It's more a transition maybe, but currently I'm using the CeQur.
Oh yeah.
Did I pronounce that correctly? CeQur?
It's the CeQur.
CeQur, there you go. I'm a recent adopter of that, like I think 2 months ago I started.
Explain to everyone what that is. They came on the show too if people want to see even more, but explain to everyone.
Yeah, it's a small device. It's mechanical. It's not digital. It's got a cannula. So you insert it with an insertion device, very much like putting a glucose monitor on yourself. And once it's attached, it doesn't have a needle; it just has this cannula, and you have to load it with insulin, just like a pump, and it's basically a manual pump. So basically, you have the insulin next to your body. With a click, you just add insulin to yourself instead of having to pull out a pen and doing the injection. And so it's got two buttons, and you have to press them both at the same time, and that gives you 2 units. And I didn't know when I started this how much I would appreciate it, because, okay, how different is that from taking the pen out? Obviously we've all gone through this. At first, the pen is this crazy thing. I'm injecting myself. And then at the end, you can do it while you ride your bicycle. So it wasn't that I really was bothered by the injections. So I was a little worried, okay, how much big an improvement is this?
Yeah. How long
And
have
I
you been
honestly,
wearing that?
2 months now, 2
Oh,
months.
wow.
Yeah. And I would say that I found it to be a huge improvement for me. It has to do with you never forget your pen. It's that, you have it attached. It has to do with, in some cases, the injection is a little more difficult. Like if you're in bed and you wake up and you see you're high, if you go out and get an injection and find the spot to put the injection, you're going to wake up more. I do a click and I roll over.
Yeah.
And it has to do with the discreetness too. If you're in a restaurant, you just click, nobody.
It's kind of like this middle step between automated insulin delivery and insulin pen. You're wearing an on-body device, but you're
Yeah,
manually giving yourself insulin. There's no electronics or, I
exactly.
believe, battery. There's no battery in it.
Yeah, and I think it's for different people. This can be very useful. I'm finding it very useful compared to the pen. That doesn't mean I won't maybe consider the automatic deliveries. Maybe this is especially useful for somebody who wants to take a lot of control or is transitioning like me and still has to figure out what. But relative to the pen, I found it like a game changer. I really am enjoying it. It works very well for me. I'm still a little new to it. I've had a few issues with things like you hit it on a door. The same things that happen with
Yeah.
with a glucose monitor.
Yeah.
The only problem is with a glucose monitor, you hit it, you kind of know it broke. You immediately get some weird reading. The one problem is if you, I don't know if it happens with automated pumps too, but you sort of don't know if it got damaged or not.
Yeah, the cannula could get occluded or kinked and
Yeah, so I
then
had one
not.
issue like that. So then you're injecting, but you don't see the results you expect, but you still don't think it's not working at all. So maybe you spend a day trying to make it still happen until you say, better I throw this one out and put a new one, which is what they recommend.
And with CeQur, there's no smartphone app, right? Or is there?
No, nothing needed like
So
that.
so when it comes to like when you're giving yourself insulin, there's no way to necessarily remember how many units of insulin unless you like keep track of it in your head and the times you gave it to yourself, right? Because like the nice thing about AIDs, the nice thing about smart insulin pens is that it's tracking the insulin you're dosing. And then when you're calculating food an hour later after that insulin dose, it's calculating, well, you have this many units on board because you don't want to stack insulin in an unsafe way. So you don't have that with this, right?
You don't have that with this. You
Yeah.
don't have that with this. And that's why I think it's in my case, I don't feel like I'm going to forget how much I gave me right away, but other people that may vary.
Oh yeah, I'm
But
the type of person that boluses for breakfast and then an hour later is like, "Oh my goodness, I didn't eat the breakfast."
no,
It
that can
happens.
happen. Or it happens, or yeah. There is something like a learning curve for me because it's so convenient. You're a little trigger happy, and so I tended to give myself too much insulin sometimes, and maybe it's also the 2 units or nothing.
Mhm.
But I think with time, I've, those are all things that are Yeah, you just have to figure it out. But
How have you learned to navigate the 2 units, right? Because since you're stuck with the 2 units, do you have to like make sure you eat a little more for that snack you want to bolus for? You know what I mean?
not much. In my case, at least, maybe with my insulin needs or sensitivity, I don't find that. But maybe
Okay.
for someone who's smaller, um, and 2 units is a lot for them, maybe, and is very sensitive, that may vary. I don't find that to be that much of an issue.
Why is it that you chose to use the CeQur?
Well, I mean, first of all, I see it as potentially an end game and potentially a transition to pumps. But while I was researching all the pumps, you know, currently, at least currently, I kind of want to have a lot of control, and I understand that some of the pumps, unless you go on the do-it-yourself, uh, which I will consider maybe, but it's one way to have a lot more control um, than the
And why
pumps.
is
So,
that? Why do you feel like you have more control with this?
well, of course, you're delivering your own insulin, so the amount you bolus or correct, you could be shooting for 110 instead of 130, basically, or for 100. I mean,
Gotcha.
it's up to the user and how risky that is and how they feel comfortable with that. But my understanding was like I wanted to at least try that. Try what number can I get when I'm making an effort that doesn't produce risky lows, but gives me a better average control. And I felt that I didn't want to go immediately on something that that had kind of it was aiming for something that I couldn't control fully.
Mm-hmm.
And I understand that I could go on the different do-it-yourself, the community. I think I'm going to look into that. But I thought this was a good first step for seeing what I should be aiming for and having a little more ease at doing that to the pen. It has to do where I'm at also. I'm only a year into this, so maybe
Yeah.
maybe in 4 years I'm fatigued with, yeah, I have my control and I can aim for what I want, but it's a lot of work, and I haven't got the burnout yet that I realize I can see glimpses of it.
Yeah, and you don't necessarily need to live with the burnout when there are other platforms out there that will prevent it also. And sometimes there are aspects to like MDI or even the CeQur that maybe they are interfering in or taking up a space in your day or your mind that you don't necessarily realize until you try that other thing and you're like, whoa, wait, when I'm sleeping, it's going to completely do its thing and keep me at 100, 110, whatever. And I don't have to wake up and check or have that alarm go off. Like 90% less often does that happen. Like, that could be something. So, but yeah, it's cool that you're trying this and
Yeah, I know that mental space is something I've heard you talk about for yourself.
very real. And I've gotten my diabetes to a place, not every day is this, a lot of days are hard, where I barely interact. I only interact when I'm eating or exercising. No corrections. Like it's doing all the corrections for me. So I know that's not the case with MDI because you need to correct because your basal isn't constantly fluctuating because you gave yourself a long-acting insulin shot, right? It's not going to fluctuate for workouts, things like that. So
Yeah,
yeah, I find that it's really helpful for me.
yeah. I think I might be going there eventually. I
I
can,
think you'll like the open source space a lot.
yeah,
You're
I
at
think,
MIT, yeah.
yeah, I was like a Linux user, that's an
Yeah.
operating, I get the idea of hacking and controlling, even if it takes the work of learning, the software and hardware, and I know I have experience with other communities that help with people going through using open source software and stuff like that. So I think it's probably a very good thing. But I don't know if this resonates with you, but like how long it took for you to want to be on a pump, like, and
I was
you know,
fast.
you were fast. So for me, it's like, okay, I still want to know where my disease is, and part of that is you doing it literally yourself.
Yeah, and by fast, and I agree with that. By fast, I mean, I was diagnosed in May, did insulin pens through October, so May, June, July, August, September. For
Yeah.
5 months, I used insulin pens. The last 2 months of that, maybe 3 months, was a smart insulin pen. So it was an insulin pen that at least showed me calculations. So like I got the very manual, then I got slightly manual with a little brains, and then I went onto a pump where I still had to control it, automate it myself. Then after a month on that, I went to an automated insulin delivery system. So over the span of 6 months, I used 4 different therapies that got me to understand how management works and then to an automated insulin pump. Not everyone's that fast. I specifically was like, I want to make videos about this stuff and document it. So like there was also that, but also I did want to be on like what I had heard through my educator to be like the premier automated insulin system. At the time.
Yeah. I mean, I think I might go there eventually. I think also, like, say, if this speaks to, the late onset versus like if you're a kid, it might be a lot harder managing your own diabetes, and parents want the automated thing much quicker. In my case, I don't have the burnout yet, but I'm very cognizant I might get it, or that need for mental space. But it's a different situation for different people. So for now, I wanted that management to at least see what I could do. Maybe that'll help me when I move to a pump that with the open source or other things where I can manage, but I have a better sense of having actually done it. What is it that I'm looking for? Also.
Yeah, I want to try it at some point and do a couple videos on it to at least, get some content out for people like you considering it or starting to use it. When I was researching for this conversation, I found this study on the ADA website that said about 8% of people with diabetes have type 3C, and that number could even be undercalculated because oftentimes it just isn't known that that's the exact cause for people's, type 1 or misdiagnosed type 2. What do you think needs to happen? This is a start. You're on here sharing your story, but what do you think needs to happen around awareness for type 3C?
That's a good question. I'm not going to give you an answer. You should take, there's a lot better experts for this, but I would just say all these diseases are kind of rare in the greater population, so you don't know about them beforehand. In the case of type 1, I don't know if that would be helpful for people to know, but in the case of pancreatitis that leads to 3C, I think it would be great to have great awareness. But it's a great unknown, honestly. I don't know how many people have 3C. Now, part of that is that you are effectively a type 1 once you understand it. So maybe it's not needed. But I think the main thing to your question is it is perhaps more preventable. My understanding is type 1. At least from what I understand, it's not preventable, basically.
Yeah, I mean, we don't fully know the causes, so we can't prevent the issue. And there are treatments out there to delay, but we don't have a legit preventative yet. There is a lot of work going into it. So, hopefully we'll see something. Yvonne, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story. I know you were a little apprehensive when we first got on that call. You were like, wait, you want me to come on your show? I was like, yeah, like someone needs to talk about it. So I think what you did today was really courageous and inspiring. And I hope that people listening feel seen and potentially inspired to share their own story because it's unique to them. So I appreciate it.
Thank you. No, I agree. I hope anyone that's touched by this and feels the need to connect does so in the comments, and And I think what you do here is helping create community. So I hope that happens. Thank you.
Ultimately, I hope that Yvonne's story helps create awareness and helps some of you feel seen. I want to start a discussion and I want to hear all of your stories, and I want Yvonne to see them as well in the comments on YouTube. So if you're listening, head over to YouTube to share your story and we could start a dialogue over there. I think that this could be really helpful for people who were just diagnosed, and especially in that type 3C category. I'm Justin, and I'll talk to you later.